like how do you feel about, or like what do you think led you to this point in your career, or also in your like professional and personal life, that made you choose this specific kind of area of work? Was there like a specific event or multiple events that led to this point, or can you even pinpoint like a certain stream into that, or like how was that for you?
Yeah, so I don't think it was one event. I think there's multiple, and there's been multiple stages. But I think just starting from a young person, maybe teenagers, I've always been fascinated about human behavior. So I just remember always thinking, like, why did that person say that? Or like, why did I say that? What happened before that? And then what happened? And then how did that lead to that? And so always kind of observing people and wondering why they're doing the things they're doing. And then I remember reading a book. It was a novel, but written by a child psychologist, and it was about her work with children as a therapist.
Okay.
And I always said I'm going to be a child therapist. And then I did my master's in clinical psychology. And when I did my child psychology block, I was like, I'm not doing child. It was just too heart-wrenching, and also you've got to deal with the parents. And anyway, so that was kind of into psychology, and then into the kind of world of work and leadership. I had to do a year of community service as part of my training in South Africa. We get placed at a rural hospital outside of the major cities to try and offer services into the underprivileged areas. And because the population I was servicing, they didn't know what psychology was. They couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak Siswati. I soon realized, the colleague and I, we realized sitting down and trying to do kind of traditional therapy was just not going to work. I'd start out through a translator trying to say to them, look, I can't offer you medication because I'm not a doctor.
Which is what they were expecting, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was like, I can't offer you a grant because I'm not a social worker. And then they'd look at me and like, so what can you do? And I'm trying to explain, well, I can listen, but I can't even speak your language. And so we started becoming much more, I suppose, activists for patient rights. We were looking at the organization, the hospital, the health system. We started educating the doctors about psychology and emotional needs of patients, and then working a lot with the hospital leadership. And that really got me interested into organizational world leadership. And so from there, I then went into corporate myself, into a insurance company in HR, and I started working with leaders, with organizational design, with talent management, career development, that whole space.
Wow, so you were actually on the other side yourself.
I was on the inside,
okay. Yeah.
And really saw the good parts of corporate and organizational space, and it was a great company, great culture. There were incredible leaders, so I got to see that side, but I also saw the challenges and the impact, and I started then in very subtle ways, just looking at the impact on people's mental health. And then I left that and went into consulting. And ever since then, my focus has been on leadership and organizational culture. Really, I've been saying for years, my passion is about bringing humanity back into the workplace. But then about, I don't know, it was 8 years ago, I burnt out myself. So I realized... And I wasn't working for a company, I was working for myself. But the pressure to perform, to deliver, to show up was partly society-driven, but also my own internal ambition, my drive, my need to prove. I had what I called superwoman syndrome. And I remember walking one day with my mentor, and I said to her, you know what? I think I'm going to resign from Lauren Davis Consulting. That's what my business was called at the time. I have the most awful boss. She drives me to work at all hours of the night. She's always messaging me. I've got to be always on. She's making me travel all the time. She says yes to every project. She's got no boundaries.
Wow.
I said, I think I'm going to go back to the office and tender my resignation. And I think that was a moment for me of shift of, okay, I have to work differently, and that then really set me on the path around workplace mental health and how do we work in healthy ways, because work is important, but how do we keep ourselves healthy? And then over the last couple of years, 5-6 years, I started thinking, well, actually it's the leaders. If they're not healthy, then that breeds that kind of unhealthy culture throughout the organization. So whilst my focus is on mental health in general in the workplace, I really want to focus specifically on the leaders, because if they're well, everything else is well. And then because of my experience working with an HR team, I've also spent the years supporting HR professionals, because their work is often the invisible emotional labor. They hold it all together and don't get much support. So I think if HR is well and leaders are well, then
there's a flow, like a base also to hold the company.
Yeah.
It's really interesting what you said, I think, about that you went through, well, first of all, had a moment of like realizing how you were put into a position where you were sent to make a difference and offer some of your services, and you realized that wasn't really possible because there was no kind of docking point. It sounded like, and that you then really early on made the experience that there is one, but not how the system kind of expected you to, and that even in a place like this, or specifically maybe in a place like this, that communicating with the people in charge, that often don't really know what's going on down there, right? Like, and so you went through from the bottom up in a way, and you've experienced the challenges on the ground in a way, and then communicated that upward. And I think that's really interesting that you then also went into HR and continued that work, because I feel like HR is kind of like, to me, the way I see it through your work, but then also just my own experience, it's always like a little bit in the middle. It's like the HR people are kind of like, communicating with everyone actually doing the work in a company, in the day-to-day work in the offices, but then also have to, communicate, filter out what's important and communicate that upward to the CEOs or the leaders, and then vice versa, have to communicate the decisions often down, and like that's such a charged position and so vital in a company, but so overlooked, like you often say. And to me, it's very interesting that you went through all of these steps and then became essentially independent with all of these things, and that's the moment where you started burning out. And I think that's very interesting, and I think that says a lot about well, first of all, the system and the way it's set up, but then also about yourself, I think, because, and about your drive for this. I think often we start working in our own companies and structures when we realize we want to do something a little bit different, and the way things are done in other places maybe aren't quite aligned with our values, and then we go our own ways and figure out, how to provide a different platform. And I think it's very often the case that, people build their own companies, and then they start burning out because they realize, I don't really know where to start even, and all this responsibility that you then have. And I can relate as well that even when you're working on your own and there isn't really a team around you, you are the team, right? So you get to feel the same effects of being a leader, even if you're just working for yourself. I think that's such a fitting image that you just used of you're quitting your own business. Like, I can relate to that so much. It's a daily struggle that I feel like I don't know if I can answer to myself anymore in a way. What do you think it is about that moment? What do you think got you to that moment that made like this person in your company, like in your own structure, choose, I can't do this anymore? Like what? Because I think we often we're able to go pretty far beyond our boundaries if we want to. We choose that, right? Like external things make us choose that, but it's also a drive. I think a lot of people, if you become a leader, there is a certain drive that you have to push forward, to push boundaries. But I think, so the pushing boundaries is, to me, I think can have a positive impact on a company, on whatever you are working towards, whatever it is, if it's a product or other things. But I think, what do you think got you to that point, and what was that point like that made you want to shift something and want to change something? Was it did you feel like you wanted to change where it was heading, or just step out of it? Like, what was that point like?
So I think a bit of both, but I had taken on way too much. So I think my child was about 5 or 6 at the time. So I was a mom to my biological son and a stepson, who I think Josh was about 8 or 9 at that stage. No, 10, 11. He had just come to live with us. So I had 2 boys at home, my own business. And then I also started a little school for my youngest son because I wasn't happy with the traditional schooling system. So I started a progressive school. And so whilst I wasn't doing the teaching, myself and this other mom, we were still having to manage this whole thing, and the teachers and the parents. And that was part of my superwoman. I thought I could do it all, and society really reinforces that. Everybody was like, oh, you're so amazing. I don't know how you do it all. And I remember when people would say that to me, I'm like, I actually don't know how I'm doing it all, because I'm not. Like inside, I was just exhausted all the time. I was miserable. Sometimes I'd stand up to deliver a keynote or run a workshop with a room full of people, and I would just stand there thinking, I just want to sit down and go to sleep. Like I just want to curl up into a ball and just go to sleep. And so it was kind of insidious. It wasn't all at once. It was this slow and just constantly trying to do things differently. Okay, so I'm going to set a boundary. I'm not going to work after 8 o'clock at night. But then there'd be a big report or a design that I'd have to do, and I'd end up doing it. Or I'm not going to travel this week because it was something important for my son. And then there was a big job. And so I tried all the typical boundary setting, time management, all the external things.
Like separating also private life and work. And
exactly. And get the work-life balance and all of that stuff. And cognitively, I knew something had to change. My family knew it. I was grumpy. I was miserable. And I'll never forget, a colleague of mine said she had asked her son, he was older at the time, what he would remember her by. And he said, Mom, I'll remember that you were always tired and all you wanted was to wait for your glass of wine on a Friday night. And I thought, my gosh, if I asked my son that would be the same thing. In fact, and so I had a couple of those awarenesses. And then one day, I was with my son in the park, and it was after school. We had done homework. We had to go and walk the dog. Then I had to get him back so he could have supper, so he could have a bath, so he could get into bed, so I could get back to work. And it was this like cycle that I was just on and rushing, and I was in the park, and I was like, "Come, we've got to go. I've got to get you supper." And he sat down in the park and just wailed. I mean, neighbors, everybody was looking, and he just screamed, and he was like, "All you care about is the schedule. That's all you ever care about is the schedule." And at that moment, I was like, what am I doing? Because it's true. That was all. And it was just to get through the schedule so that I could sit at my desk and carry on with my work.
Yeah.
And I had completely convinced myself that it's fine because, I always used to say there are these people that say that their family is their most important thing. But yes, my family is important, but work's my thing. Like that's, and I was quite proud of it, that I'm okay to say it's not my family, it's work. But it wasn't giving me joy. It wasn't, and so that's when I started to think, well, if work's my thing, I should be feeling a lot more, not always like happy or joyful, but just a lot more energized. Yeah.
Was there any kinds of rewards though, like within that?
Yes, loads. I mean, the work we were delivering was incredible work, and the impact we were having with companies, and, where I got to work with leaders who really got it and saw their shifts, and company cultures where we did... we worked with their values and their mission and their vision. Like, it was really impactful. And that was a bit of the drug in a way. Because,
and the drive, yeah.
Because it was so I was making this amazing difference in the organizational space, but my life and my family's life was not that amazing. They were not getting the best of me. And I was, all this stuff I was sprouting to everybody, people, that you must give the best of you, not what's left of you. And I had all this rhetoric. So I knew what I needed to do, but I could not do it because I was so entrenched in my business. I had a business partner at the time, in the school where I had this other mom I was doing it with my family. Then my father also got quite critically ill. He's fine now. But that was kind of like the final. I just had no capacity to deal with. I had no slack for that. And that really tipped me over the edge, but I kept going because that's what those of us that are driven and ambitious, we just keep thinking it's a fault with us. So we're like, okay, I've just got to dig deeper, and I've just got to work harder, and I've got to sleep less.
And it's like you said, I think specifically when you're in a position where you know, as a woman with a family and their own business, like things are just expected of you that aren't of other people. And that is, I think, also something that is really important to stress and talk about. And, you know, like, just there's like a blind spot, I think, in corporate and company structures about this specific thing. And it's not just about it's not just a gender issue or anything like that, but I think specifically in a situation where you are, you know, often, you know, if people are like in leadership positions and they have kids and they are a single mom and or single parent, and I think, yeah, there's like a lot of things you are expected to do, and then when you, like you said before, when you then share these things with people, they are just they are more amazed than they are compassionate or empathetic, and that I think is disguised as like, that's not my problem. It's like, wow, that's incredible, go off and do it, and then versus, oh my gosh, what do you need, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that is so interesting, because also with a lot of people with new startups or young people that are in leadership positions, they are often, you know, like a lot of my colleagues and peers, you know, people in their like early 20s, early 30s, there's no space for mental well-being, because it's all about pushing and going harder and faster and bigger, and it's just not, I think it's not sustainable. It might get you, like you said, it might get you some rewards on the way, and you might look back and think, oh, that was great, I did that, but to what cost, you know, what's the price for that? And you just will not be able to do it until the rest of time, and that should be the incentive, right? I think to do it in a way that it is fulfilling in all parts of your life, and also sustainably fulfilling in a way that you can do it for multiple decades or however long you want to, you know? Exactly. I think that's the beauty about being having your own business, is that you can, if you're well and healthy, you can do it until you're bored of it, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's so interesting. And yeah, I'm so curious about how that then started changing for you when you started working with people in this position, because you were just describing how you went through the machine in a way. What changed for you when you then, this is kind of jumping over a step in between that I'm curious about also, but if you like jump a couple steps forward to the point where you maybe had your first clients in the leadership positions or HR, how did you start looking differently at your own experience in that?
Yeah, I mean, I could see a lot of myself reflected in them, and the pressure, because even though they were in the company and I was working for myself, it's the same pressure to deliver, to show up in a particular way. And what I started to really recognize through my own work was this internal, we call it drive, we call it ambition, we call it achievement orientated, but actually it's this deep-seated need to prove. And that I'm only enough when I'm delivering, when I've got the results, when I'm showing up in this particular way. And so part of that reinforcement that we get from society of, oh, you're so amazing, I don't know how you do it, feeds into that of like, you see, look how worthy I am, look how important I am. And so I started to recognize that in a lot of the leaders and HR professionals I was working with, and just started to name it and call it out and say, like, I'm not saying you can't be ambitious, and I'm not saying that you need to be a couch potato and never want for anything and just be complacent. But to your point, how can we do it in a way that is healthy and sustainable, and it's part of our life? It's not so. I often love to play with like language and the rhetorics we've been fed, and so a long time ago I started thinking this. Firstly, the word work-life balance is a complete misnomer, because balance, you'll never get the balance. So we're always failing. So you're always feeling like I'm not doing this right, because you can never get the balance. So that I started questioning, and most of my clients, even now, they'll know like balance is a swear word for me, because it's just, it sets us up for failure. But then I started saying, we actually, in one sentence, we're saying work and life. So we're literally being told we have to balance work with the rest of our life. And that whole equation is completely wrong. Because why should work be separated out from every other aspect of our lives and be the thing that is most important to be on those scales to balance? And that work is that we literally have been conditioned to believe that work is that thing that is the most important, and then the rest of life we have to fit in somewhere else. And so for me, it's around. I often draw these circles where if this is your life, at the moment we've been told work needs to fit almost right inside of it, and then you, in those little spaces, you can fit other bits of life. But what the work that I do is trying to help people get to a place where that circle of work shrinks. It doesn't have to be the smallest. It can still be your biggest circle, but it shrinks to make space for the other things and to have space. It doesn't have to all be filled. And I think that starting to name that, starting to call that out, starting to question, why are you so busy all the time? What is fueling it? Do you really need to be in every meeting? Do you really need to be on all the time? Just the other day I had a conversation with a client, do you have to check your phone for the hour you're at gym? You're not in emergency medical services. Nobody's going to die. But we're so hooked in because
we think that's how it feels. It feels like if I don't check this email, if I don't respond at this moment, maybe I will die even,
exactly.
Well,
it is to that point. I mean, we laugh, but it is that we worry somebody else will die and they think they will die because of this urgency, hurry, sickness. But we do think we'll die. We won't be relevant. So if we don't answer immediately, then maybe people will think, well, I don't have a good work ethic, or I'm not a good team player, or, they don't need me as much. And so then, if I don't respond and they manage to solve the thing on their own, well, then what role am I playing? And then I'm going to be irrelevant and disposable. And so, a lot of the work, and this is really where I think my intersection of psychology, leadership, HR, workplace dynamics really intersects, is trying to look at what is our psychology underneath it. What keeps us so busy? What keeps us in this driven, ambitious space? And what constantly causes us to burn out and stay in burnout? And I think it's layered. I think there's am I good enough? Am I worthy? And underneath it, which is the harder thing to name, is a real existential angst of meaninglessness. So if I am not busy all the time, and if I'm not needed, and if I'm not, pouring myself into something, if it's not work, then I see people just transfer that to a hobby. So they say, well, I'm not working, but then they're now training for marathons and they're trying to do their personal best, and they, or they're learning guitar and now they're killing themselves to learn guitar. So it just gets transferred. And actually, if we had to stop and do nothing, it's terrifying for people, because then we have to confront that essence of the human condition and the frailty of well, what is there really?
So I mean, this might be a very big question to answer in this setting, but how do we confront that question?
It's a really difficult one, and it's a very deeply personal one. And I do quite a bit of work in the field of existential psychotherapy, and what we talk about there is looking at the big facts of life that are confronting us. It's death, isolation, freedom, and meaninglessness.
Wow.
Those are the four. Okay. Those are the four existential truths that I think human beings face. Well, we don't face, we run from. And so part of it is just leaning into them, looking at them and having conversations about them, and what does it mean? And what am I terrified of? And, how do I engage with it? And it's a deeply personal, because people have to find some way of understanding it. So for some, it's through a religion or some form of spirituality, because that gives them the bigger picture, the meaning. For others, some people go the completely nihilistic route of well, there is no deeper meaning, and this is it, and I'm just going to live for that. For others, it's a hedonistic thing of well, I'm just going to, really live life to the fullest, because there's nothing. And so I think there's no prescribed way, but the way through it is to just start naming these things and saying, if I sit still, there is deep discomfort that I'm going to encounter. Typically, people don't go that deep into the existential stuff straight away. It's normally first what they have to face is often the discomfort in their lives, the marriage that's falling apart, the strained relationships with parents or friends or children, the fact that they maybe aren't as healthy as they'd like to be or aren't as happy, so they have to confront the things that they're not satisfied in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easier. I think the one podcast episode I've called is Busy is the New Lazy, because it's almost easier to just keep going. It's I'm too busy, I'll look at that later. I'm too busy, I can't even pay attention to it.
But that you're actually avoiding
absolutely
something that is causing that.
Yeah.
But what I find really interesting within everything you just said is that, to me, like specifically because we're here in South Africa and you're based here, there is something that I only kind of started really engaging with and thinking about when I started coming here and I started, interacting with people here and getting to know also a lot about my own culture and about myself through just mirroring, like people's stories and hearing the struggles that people face in the day-to-day. And what I find extremely interesting, not just here but everywhere in the world, is especially with this with this work culture and hype and what you call the busy is the new lazy and all these trends, is that I think a lot of these mental well-being programs and work-life balance programs and everything are looking at communities and parts of our society that have a lot of agency and control over their decisions and over their lives. But there's a lot of people that are in positions where there's things in their lives, if it's marriages or a visa situation in a country, or they're tied to their job because otherwise they get deported or whatever it is, where they have very limited agency over the situation that they're in. And I'm just curious how that has been for you here, like work, if you've encountered situations like that where you maybe felt like, oh, I need a different approach, or how do I help people in that situation? Do they maybe have more agency that they think they have, or can I give them agency in a different way that then enables them to get out of this kind of job where they're stuck and actually get something where they have the safety of that, whether it's a marriage or a job, but still, propel up into more agency and control. And I don't know if you've experienced that at all, or...
Yeah. I mean, the word agency forms a core part of the work that I do, because I think we can't live a fulfilled life if we have no agency. And I do believe in most circumstances there is some level of agency that somebody can access. I think most of us spend life being passive recipients in our life and just letting life happen, or we think life is happening to us. And so the work that I do is, how do you become an active participant in your life, whatever that looks like. And so if you are, and I work not only in South Africa but globally as well, if you are, let's say, in a job and you cannot leave because of a visa purpose or whatever the case may be, and it's revolting and you're hating it and it's a toxic culture and boundaries are not respected and you're burning out and all of that, part of it is, well, what can you do in that situation? I always talk about Stephen Covey's circle of concern and circle of influence, which is saying there's certain things circle of control. There's certain things that will concern you and bother you and impact you, but you actually cannot do anything about. And then there are certain things that are within your control, but actually that's very limited. It's only really your thoughts and your reactions.
Okay.
And so in those situations, often for people, it will be, we have to start with a deep acceptance of what the current situation is. Everybody nowadays is saying it is what it is. And I know that can be annoying, but it's so powerful to say, it is what it is. You're here. For the foreseeable future, you need to be in this job. How do you then separate some of your emotional attachment to your work? And how do you show up and do what you can do, do it excellently, but what are you doing that's extra? Because I always believe there's part of us that's adding to it by our own angst and our own fear-fueled behavior. And so a lot of the work I do with people there is to say, again, like, how attached are you to your work from an identity perspective? So how much of this is real versus how much is it, well, if I don't keep busy and I don't keep proving myself, then who am I? And so we do a lot of that kind of work to separate it. And then sometimes it's a horrible thing to say that for now I have to stay, and it's shit. And can I say that?
You can say anything you like.
And it's shit.
This is your space.
I swear a lot, so I better just...
Please, you're South African.
Exactly. And it's revolting. And for now, because of your situation, this is what it is. Obviously, I'm not talking about if you're in an abusive marriage, then that's not safe. But if the job is not putting you in any danger... part of what makes us so unhappy and takes away our agency is where we keep railing against what is. And we're like, it shouldn't be like this. I don't want it. I hate my job. I want to get out. It's like, okay, yes, but you can't right now. So what do you do in order to survive? And that's not this might not be your most joyful, energizing period of your life, but it's a survival. And you just have to see it for that. And how do we plot a path through that?
And what's really interesting about that, like essentially you're describing what you were saying before. If you look at it as a circle, and if like your entire life is the circle, and then work is at the circle within that, it's essentially shrinking that circle, right? And like making space for other things again.
Absolutely.
And the whole person that you are, even if time capacity wise you can't maybe do that, but then if it's just an emotional or mental thing. And I think what's beautiful about that is that even if that means for a moment there is some sort of acceptance that needs to happen about your current situation, but I think shrinking that kind of metaphorical circle and making space for other parts of you, that will then allow, that is creating agency. I think it allows, thinking process, and it allows emotional capacity to maybe allow your mind and your heart to think, oh, what else do I even want to do? Or which you can't let your body and mind go to that point when you're so overworked. You can't be creative, and I mean creative in a very loose sense, in terms of like creative with your life, like what inspires you, what fulfills you, and you need to be able to have that space to find who you are, and what then ultimately creates, a lot more agency to even find a position or think, oh, maybe I am actually good at this and I should apply for this job, or maybe I should just, give it a go and see what happens. And maybe just because I burn for something, someone else will see that within me. And I think that work that you're describing is essentially just making space for that and giving, because agency is something you can't manufacture, right? It's essentially taken, or it's a balance of giving someone the space for it and then someone actually stepping into it in a way. That's how I perceive it, at least. And that's what's really beautiful. I think that the work that you're describing is essentially just opening up space for it, and then people can tap into it and exactly. Because I think we all have a kind of innate drive to want to tap into our agency. That's, I think, who we are. We're not born like disobedient or anything. I think we all want to participate in society and in community and in culture, and we want to be part of it, and we want to be recognized for it. And it's really beautiful what you're describing, is that you're just essentially holding up a mirror in a way to the potential that people have within themselves. And yeah, it's really interesting.
I think, though, if I can just jump in here,
please.
Like, yes, we all have an innate drive for agency, but what I've seen time and time again is with agency comes responsibility and accountability. And unfortunately, people are scared of that.
Yeah.
So it's easier to stay the victim of your life and say, well, I can't do anything, and it's the leader, and it's the work situation, and it's my visa situation, and it's whatever. It's the external thing, and therefore I'm going to just stay miserable. Because if I become an active participant and I start making choices, then I'm responsible for the consequence of those choices, which is what agency is. And it's amazing to say, I made a terrible choice. It was a bad consequence. Great. Not great. I mean, I'll have to deal with that, but I can make a different choice then. So that's the beauty when you see the upside of agency. But most people are too afraid, because if I make a choice and it's a bad choice, I don't want to have to hold myself responsible for that. And so I see a lot of, it's the blame culture, and it's blaming everybody else and desperately wanting things to not be the way that they are. And I think a huge shift that I see when people start making that shift to access that innate agency is where they start realizing, well, I'm actually also responsible for where I'm at now. There were decisions I made that got me into this job. Here I am, and there are decisions that I made that for whatever reasons I am stuck here for now, and I need to own that decision. It didn't just happen to me, and as soon as they can own it, they can then start owning other things and make different choices. But again, busy is the new lazy, because it's more comfortable to just stay as that passive recipient and be the victim, because we don't have to confront, we don't have to own. Ownership and accountability is very hard for a lot of people, I'm realizing.
And what has been your experience working with leaders in HR to help with people, like help people claim that ownership or get to the point of recognizing even that they have made these decisions and that they led to a certain point? And how has that experience been? And like, how do you help people to get to that point?
Yeah, I guess it's through lots of conversation and lots of unpacking and lots of, well, what did you do then? And then what did you do then? And how did that lead? So helping them to connect, like you said, hold up the mirror and help them to connect the dots. And then, I mean, my approach is just quite straightforward and confrontational. Like sometimes I've just said, look, both are hard, both are shit.
Yeah.
Like choose your hard, because if you stay, it's going to be hard. If you try and leave, it's going to be hard, but you can choose. You're choosing to stay, so you're choosing that hard. And I think part of it that comes back to that bigger existential question is challenging people around, but life's supposed to be happy, and I'm supposed to, be joyful, and life's supposed to be easy, and this isn't fair. And so I challenge a lot of those unuseful beliefs about life to say, but life is unfair, and nobody ever promised you happiness. Where did that ever? I mean, I know this sounds also depressing, but actually,
I think it's the
truth. It's the truth of the human condition, and I think, there's a frame in psychoanalytic theory that talks about our movement into adulthood that actually moves us from what they call the paranoid schizoid phase, which is very much black or white, all good, all bad. And as babies, it's like we see our mother as all good when she provides food and then all bad when she's gone. And that we kind of carry that into our childhood and young adulthood, and so we believe in that developmental stage, we believe in pure evil, and there is this pure good. And that's what everybody's aspiring to, is this. But actually what true adult development is, like when you, according to this Kleinian theory, once you have reached maturity, you actually move into what she calls the depressive position. Because it is inherently depressing to know that there is no pure good.
Yeah.
Life isn't, the human condition is messy, it's frail, it's uncomfortable. If you just look at our general emotions, the big five, we've got glad, but we've got sad, mad, and bad. So out of the four big ones, only one is this like happiness thing. And so I blame Coca-Cola for...
You heard it here first.
Yeah. For this, don't come after me, but this perpetuating this belief that there's this pure good that we're aiming for and striving for. And so the depressive position pretty much says, like, life is hard and it's depressing when you think about it deeply. And when you face into that reality, it's quite freeing, because you can say, well, then I can have moments of joy. So for me, when people say to me, like, or when I'm running workshops on mental health, like my definition of well-being or true mental health, obviously you need to have physical health and kind of good cognitive capacity, good relationships, financial health, and then the last one is just the capacity to be able to experience moments of joy. And that's it, like where you are open to saying, oh wow, this is a great experience, this is a great moment, and when it's gone, it's gone. I'll be sad, and it'll be horrible to face the normality and ordinariness of my life, but I'll be open for the next moment
And
of
the
joy.
same really applies for all of these emotions, I think. I think that's what was a powerful realization for me, is that for me, it was a moment of redefining the depressiveness into complexity, you know, and realizing how what you just said about this moment of like brief moments of happiness and brief encounters with that feeling, the same is true for all the other feelings, you know. Nothing really, everything subsides and nothing really sticks around forever. It sometimes can very much feel like that, and I think that's often how depression also then manifests itself.
Exactly.
But it really, and I think there's a lot of different tools, you know, to explore that. And there's, you know, there's meditation, and there's like somatic work, and there's traditional therapy, and there's a lot of different ways to get to that experience. But I think ultimately we live that experience on a day to day, and all we need is a little bit of, I think this kind of mirror that you're describing, or it can come in different forms, but I think experiencing this, like stepping back from this attachment that we have to these emotions, and stepping back into more of a, like, even if it's just a very small step of an observational lens, and realizing, oh, I felt this feeling for the last half hour, but actually now I feel a little bit better. Now I feel something a little bit different, and tomorrow morning I'll feel something else, and just, it's, you know, like, I think really powerful to just experience how fleeting things are. And, you know, there's this like famous saying of this too shall pass. And I think that it's very powerful to just experience the fluidity of this experience as a human, as a leader, as a working person, as a parent or a child or whatever it is. I think it's so powerful what you said about this experience with parents, because we have this strong image of people, whether it's a parent or it's a boss or a coworker or an HR leader. We see them in a certain way, and we define them then therefore as well, and we forget that they also have this complexity within them. And I think if we would just do that a little bit more, it would just become a little bit more soft, and not as we need to strive for this one. Like you said, we have these like main different emotions, and we're just striving for one all the time, and that isn't helping that emotion or the other ones. It's essentially just cancelling everything out in a way, and we can't achieve one with disregarding the others. And that's really, really powerful, I think, what you were describing.
And I think that's where therapy, or in the workspace coaching, is so important, because it just gives people that space to zoom out, kind of out of the busyness, out of the hustle, and just, you know, for an hour every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, just to zoom out and say, okay, how am I feeling? What's going on? What am I thinking? How am I showing up? Where are these complexities that are kind of playing out under the surface that I'm not kind of leaning into? And it's a safe space, you know, that for people to really engage with all these uncomfortable feelings and notice them and explore them. You know, most of my clients, they'll say, I know you're going to tell me now to feel my feelings, you know, and they get so annoyed, and because they want something maybe easier or quicker or simpler, and they're like, but that, like, how can that help? And I'm like, well, because you're a human being made up of emotions, and your emotions drive your body. And if you're not dealing with your emotions, you know, that manifests. So what coaching does for leaders, for HR professionals, where they're holding all this complexity and other people's emotions and their own emotions, it just gives them that space to zoom out and say, or to breathe and say, well, what's mine? What's theirs? What am I feeling? How should I think about it? And
just, you know, like supervision does, right?
Exactly.
Like, I think that's such a key point, I think, that you just mentioned about these positions, about HR specifically, that it's not just a communication officer, right? It's like you hold the space for what we are talking about right now within a whole company, and you have no one to talk to, which is crazy. And so please continue. That's why,
I mean, I really feel that it's ridiculous that we let leaders and HR professionals loose in an organization without any support. You know, you would never let an athlete train, let's say, for the Winter Olympics or whatever, or, you know, for a major marathon. You would never let them train and compete without a whole host of support. You've got their coach, their physio, their therapist, probably their nutritionist, and we know that they need that team to stay in peak performance, and yet leaders and HR professionals are just thrown into this organizational space and expected to navigate this landscape. And I just think having that space, whether it's a supervision space, a coaching space, a peer group, I mean, for me, if more and more leaders could just start speaking to each other honestly about the difficulties, it just would help them be more effective and not almost fumbling around in the dark.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind now for me when you're like describing also like your own experience earlier, but now your experience with your clients, is that within this picture that you described of the life circle, I'm just going to call it, and the kind of like the work that fits into it, and then the other parts around it, how has it been for you in your own life, but then also with your clients and maybe peers as well, about the kind of the best way I can describe it is the kind of like fluidity of these definitions. I think a lot of the times, especially where I'm from, like in the global north, in like the Western culture, you choose one path and then you stick with that path until you die. And that is, I think, fits for some people and it works and it's very fulfilling, but for others it doesn't. And I think redefining that, you get to redefine it multiple times, as many times as you want, as it feels healthy to you, is for me was a major realization and agency, like form of agency, and experiencing that I feel more fulfilled when I make these decisions and I make them on my own accounts and not what is expected of me within my community or society. How has that been for you, maybe in your own life? You spoke before about this moment of kind of like waking up and realizing, I need to change something. But then I'm sure there's been many more moments after that, like where you had to redefine again and then again. It might be on a day-to-day. I think, there's also such little space for, if you talk about women in any kind of industry, there's no space for like PMS cycles. There's no space for, I feel differently this week. I feel differently like my capacity is not the same every day, and it's not just for women, it's for everyone. But just as one example, I think there is, very little space for the kind of like breathing organisms that we are. And that we just don't have the same capacity. Like you brought up the example of sports. I think that's the same. It's treated more, I think, as like your body will be tired one day and you can't perform the same in the gym every single day. You need rest days. But our work setup isn't like that. It's not set up like that. We have 2 days in the week where we can kind of recharge or like rewire ourselves a little bit, but then we're thrown back into it. And how has that been for you, like in your own life and maybe also with your clients? I mean, I love how you said we are breathing organic organisms, and the system of work is rigid and it doesn't allow for that. And I think, again, to the agency point, it's about how do we keep reinventing ourselves. And so over time, I've always been in the field of human behavior and psychology and organizational psychology, mental health, but it's just evolved in terms of the work I do, the kind of people I do, the nature, the way I show up. So I was burning out, and cognitively I knew I had to make a change, but I was so stuck. I was so stuck in the school, I was stuck in the work, I was just stuck in my life and didn't know, despite trying all the different boundaries and all the time management things and the taking a break and, all the things that we're told of what to do, and exercise and eating healthily, I just wasn't changing my burnout or my way of being, my mental health. And so, and this was and I am very aware that my story is quite drastic. It's not everybody has the capacity to do this, but it did require a drastic move. So what happened was one night, like 2 a.m, I'm busy working still, catching up, doing all the stuff.
after having fallen asleep, putting my child to sleep, then I got to drag myself out of bed at 10 o'clock. Anyway, and my husband had gone out for drinks with his mates. And so I was sitting in my office working. He comes home, having had a couple of drinks, sits down in my office, and I'm ready to kill him because it's like, what do you do? Like, don't come near me. You've been out having fun. I'm here working, poor me. Yeah. And he says, I have an idea. And I'm now really ready to kill him because you don't come with your drunken ideas at 2 a.m. while I'm working. And he said, how about we pack this all up and we go traveling for a year. We take a sabbatical.
Wow. And
he threw that out there, and something in me just clicked, and I turned around. I said, yes, that's a brilliant idea.
Wow. Okay.
And he panicked because he thought I'd throw him out and we'd never speak about it again.
Yeah.
And that started a cycle of different ideas. Anyway, what it ended up being was we rented out our house and we bought a caravan, and we were going to take a year off to tour around South Africa. I put my business online. My husband closed his business. My son, we put him on online schooling, and we were hitting the road for a year.
Okay.
I was going to try and do a bit of work and time off. And we got as far as Plettenberg Bay, which is along our east coast here, and then lockdown happened.
I was like, what is going to change
What's
the plan?
going to change the plan? Lockdown happened. So we made this plan long before we even knew about COVID or lockdown. But we were so well set up. But then we were in a campsite, and the campsite owner was coming. It was the Easter weekend, I think, or something. And the campsite owner was telling everybody we had to pack up and go home because he had to close the campsite. It must have been before the Easter weekend. Anyway, it's school holidays. And we went to him and we said, we don't have anywhere to go back to. My husband had this amazing idea of staying there for lockdown at the campsite. Right. I was having none of that. Right. And so the campsite owner put us in touch with friends of his that had a farm a little bit further out of town, a farm stall and a dairy farm, and on it they had some holiday accommodation. So he said, go and ask them, I'm sure, because everybody will be vacating, so I'm sure they'd be happy to have somebody for the 3 weeks. We literally got there the morning of lockdown, and the lady showed us, she said, look, we've got these little 2-bedroom cottages, but we actually have this family house that we only rent out occasionally. Maybe you want to have a look at it. It's in the forest. I don't know if you'll like it. So we go down this indigenous forest path into this clearing where there's this double-story wooden house, 3-bedroom, with a massive garden and a private forest around it. Yeah. And she said, well, you can take it for lockdown. And we literally moved in that day and stayed there for 2 years.
You stayed there for 2 years?
For 2020 and 2021. Incredible. And then they kicked us out because everything was opening up. Okay. And then but from there, we then moved to another small holding out of town for 2 years. And so why I'm sharing that, it is drastic, but it was there that my major transformation happened because I was away. My husband, so where his idea came from was he knew he needed to remove me from all the trappings that I had kind of caught myself in. And he didn't know how. And lockdown for me, and I know for many people it was traumatic and revolting, but for me it was amazing because for the first 3 weeks I literally slept. I'd slept until 3-4 o'clock every afternoon. Wow, because that's obviously what my body needed, and we don't get the luxury to do that. Typically you'll get booked off for 3 weeks of burnout leave. You can't sleep the whole time because you still got your responsibilities.
And you're going back.
You're going back. And then because I had put my business online and I had pulled back, and it was COVID, the big delivery work had all been cancelled. So I was literally just seeing individual clients online. And that enabled me to regulate my nervous system. I had kind of regular work hours. I could sit down and have lunch every day. I finished at a particular time. We went for walks. And I did that for the full 2 years. And that's pretty much what it took to reset my system. Wow. And then we went to the small holding, and I kept up that framework for the first year. And then 2023 was when I started really becoming more active in workplace mental health, more outspoken. COVID gave me the opportunity to start using the word mental health in the workplace. Before that, I was always trying to allude to it, but you couldn't use. But in COVID, suddenly people were saying this is affecting our mental health. And so then I really started pushing that agenda around workplace mental health. And so 2023 is really kind of where my core focus then took off, because I realized, I mean, we're in a mental health pandemic, and knowing my experience, and then my clients that kept coming to me in various levels of burnout, you know, I realized there was serious work that needed to be done, because you can't just book somebody off for 3 weeks and expect to recover. So there's a rhythm change that has to happen to one's life, but that starts by shrinking the work circle and being able to unhook one's identity from work and our worth, and being able to say, if I'm not working, I'm still okay. I'm still okay as I am. I'm still lovable. I'm still, I'm still a human being. And so the clients that I've worked with, a lot of them in the beginning, even now when I get new clients, and I'll say, this is a journey. It's a 2-3 year journey to recovery, but you're never fully recovered. It's like you're an addict, and you will never go back to pre-burnout level. And they are really gutted with that thought. But actually, they don't want to go back there, because they'll just land up burning out again, which is what I realized.
That's an interesting point,
So I realized that, and I had a little bit of this last year where I was really busy, full up with work, launching all kinds of initiatives, and that inner striver kind of started showing her head, and I was exhausted again, and pushing late hours, and I had to stop and say, like, what am I doing? It's not healthy, and I could feel myself burning out, because you forever have to pace yourself. You never, like an addict always says, they're always in recovery. I think once you've burnt out, you're a work addict, and you always have to pace yourself.
So we spoke just now about your experience of what it was like for you how you broke that cycle within the system, and the kind of perpetuated burnout, scaffolding in a way. I think it's really interesting what you shared about. Obviously, it's quite a unique situation with the external circumstances, but then also your own situation with your family, and being able to kind of step out of it completely. But I think what is really valuable, regardless, is to hear is what your body needed in that time, and what your whole system, your nervous system, and everything needed, and how long it took to get to a point of feeling well and feeling recharged and kind of recalibrated and everything. So what I would love to hear your thoughts on is, what do you think we can do, companies, but also individuals within companies and in their own lives, can do to prevent having to take this amount of time off, or what if they can't do that, or don't have the privilege or the whatever means to do that? What else can we do to prevent that point, or even to just slow down the kind of, I don't know if this is even the point, to slow down the amount of time to get to burnout. Obviously the point is to prevent it at all, completely. But maybe you can speak on that a little bit if you have ideas or thoughts.
I mean, I think that's the main thing, is to look more at prevention. At the moment, the model, both in the medical profession but also in the organizational space, is cure. So we only step in once somebody's already burnt out. And there's, employee assistance programs that are there where you can phone if you're in a crisis. And so once you're already burnt out, the road to recovery is long, and so the impact individually and systemically in the organization is really long and arduous, and it has a massive impact. And so prevention is the way to go. And I think a lot of companies are trying with the wellness programs at the moment, where they offer a yoga class or a health day or a free smoothie Friday or whatever the case may be. Some have no meeting Wednesdays, so there's lots that people are trying, and I don't want to dismiss them because I think it's better than nothing. But all of that, unfortunately, is what I call well-being washing, because it's not actually... It's not changing the scaffolding of the system and of the way we work and of our relationship with work, A. And B, it's laying the problem just at the foot of the individual. It's saying, you need to do yoga and get enough sleep and exercise and eat well, and you do all of that and we'll help provide that. And then it's up to you to get to be well. And if you're not... you're at fault because you didn't make enough time, you don't care about yourself enough, you don't have good boundaries. And so that rhetoric that we've got at the moment is very dangerous. So it's shaming, it's blaming, and it's keeping organizations and leaders completely devoid of any responsibility of what's happening to the individual. So I'm not saying individuals can be excused, because we need to take care of ourselves, but it's a both and approach that we have to start looking at. And I think, so if I just look from an individual perspective, yes, of course, all the stuff we get fed all the time is important. Eating well, sleeping well, drinking your water, taking your vitamins. But what I always say is, you can do all of that, and if you're not dealing with what's going on in your head and your heart, you'll still be unhealthy. And what I mean by that is what we've spoken about before. If you're not actually dealing with your deeper psychology and your relationship to work, no matter what you do, you're still going to end up being addicted to work and potentially, if not burning out completely, being in a level of burnout. So I kind of feel like all those health tips almost are just helping people carry on being burnt out.
I see, yeah.
So what needs to happen is, maybe this is a bit repetitive, but we have to start by separating our worth from our work. We have to stop saying that I'm only worthy when I'm working, when I'm delivering, and being able to kind of accept who we are, warts and all, the human frailties, and say, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm still okay as a human being. And kind of saying I work and I enjoy my work for some of us, or I want to do a good job and I have to work for money, all of those reasons, but I'm not completely enmeshed with my job. And I think, when we take that step, we can really start to prevent burnout, but that's often the journey people go on in terms of the recovery, is having to separate, and that sometimes does require a major step change. It doesn't have to be as drastic as what I did, but often people will leave that job, or they will leave the organizational space and start their own company, or they will step out completely, or they will take a sabbatical, or they will take a demotion, they'll come out of a leadership position. So it's very hard to recover in a system that is the one that burnt you out.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I always say it's like this, the organization's like a fish tank, and if the system is toxic or perpetuates unhealthy work habits, it's like it's all covered with moss and it's murky in there. You can take the goldfish out, clean it up, give it all the tools and tips at once, but you throw it back in, it's going to get murky.
That's powerful.
And so when I share that analogy with people, sometimes they're like, okay, well, I got to get out of this fish pond. Like this tank isn't for me anymore.
That feeds into the question I was going to ask, which builds on what you just said. But so I'm curious, after the time that you've taken away from work and away from kind of your life in general, what are some of the things that you then changed, maybe some of the lessons, but also especially some of the things you then incorporated into when you went back into work and into your daily life, to not go back into that dirty, murky fish tank? Because in some ways you probably did go back into the work that you were doing before, but what was different? What did you change?
I think one is a huge vigilance around, why am I doing the thing I'm doing? So am I saying yes to this piece of work? Am I working late? Am I, whatever, rushing around feeling hustled and harried? What is underneath that behavior? Is it because it's really necessary, because it's a busy period and that sometimes happens? Or am I doing it because I'm trying to prove something? I'm trying to get the dopamine hit, the reward, the affirmation, the approval from outside. So am I striving for something external, and is that why I'm doing this? And often people say, but I don't have a choice because my deadlines are my deadlines, or, you know, my manager's telling me I have to do all of this work, and no matter how I push back, they just keep saying I have to do it all. And I hear that, and I still want to challenge that, because if you keep doing it all, then they're going to believe that you can keep doing it all.
Got you, yeah.
So you're the one that is shooting yourself in the foot. So, and people are like, oh, but I can't drop a ball. Again, you're not in emergency medical services. Dropping a ball does not mean somebody's going to die. So if you don't deliver, or you deliver late, well, that actually helps your leader then realize that you're not coping. But what we do is we say, I can't cope, my workload's too full, I'm burning out. And yet, because we push ourselves and we think we want to show that we can be a good employee, we kill ourselves to deliver.
Yeah.
And all the manager sees is, oh, well, she says she's overworked, but she keeps delivering. So why should I pull back?
Can't be that bad,
Yeah, it can't be that bad. And so we have to be okay with failing, I suppose. We have to be okay with saying, I'm not going to meet that deadline. And let the management feel some of the pressure of that. And not then, and that's where it's like not then linking your worth to that and saying, oh, but now I'm a failure. It's not. You are managing a system and you're managing your health. And so often I say to people, it's actually a business risk to keep pushing through and to keep delivering, because you're going to collapse. And then what? So you're trying to be so available and so needed and show how amazing you are. But when you collapse and you have to be booked off for 6 months, then you're actually putting the business more at risk, as opposed to pulling back and saying, this is all I can do.
So it's like the approach we're currently using is more acute and kind of short-sighted, it sounds, what you're describing, but we're actually, and we're doing that thinking we're helping everyone in the company, and we're everyone's gaining from our work, but really it's it's like you said, it's like the risk is much higher than accepting our, not even our faults, but our just different levels of capacity, I guess. And what you're describing, I think now we were talking about more about the workers and the people kind of like on the foundation of a company, but the same goes for the leaders, right? And the HRs, like they struggle with the same pressure for deadlines. If it's even if you're at the top of the like quote unquote pyramid of a company, and you maybe are the person that everyone is answering to, in a weird way, when you're at that position, I always think it reverses the pyramid, because you are responsible for it standing on the foundation, and you need to keep it running. So you're answering also to, like you said before earlier, you're answering to yourself essentially, and when you're in that position, which is also like huge amount of pressure. But what do you think is like, what do you think are some of the things a company or an organization can do, aside from maybe that is part of the in-between steps, but you were mentioning before all of the things we're doing with the smoothie Fridays and the like no meetings Wednesdays, all of these things, like aside from those things, what else do you think can a company do, and whether that goes to HRs or to management personnel or whoever is responsible for making that change, but what do you think they can do so that their workers feel more, so that they feel like they can share moments like, oh, do you know what, I think I can't submit this deadline, I thought I could before, but it's actually bigger than I expected. And I think a lot of the times people want to say that, but they're scared, and they think they just get sacked if they do that, or they maybe get that one time, where they can misstep, but then the third time that's it, or something. Like, is it just a conversation they need to have with their workers, or is it is it already at the hiring process, or is it more similar to maybe like a relationship where you need like regular check-ins and affirmations of like, you know what, like every week I'll tell my workers it's fine, you trying your best, but like keep trying your best, but you know, you don't go, what is it like that they can do, you know? I wonder, is it?
So part of it is being okay with not being perfect, realizing you're human, you're not going to achieve everything, because I think we expect ourselves to be machines. And part of that is and this was my direct experience that I had to engage with, and it's two words that really like taste horrible in my mouth to even say them, but it's mediocre and disagreeable. And I think we have to get used to that as human beings, is that sometimes you're just going to be mediocre and ordinary and very average. And nobody wants to be that. You know, I'm highly competitive. I mean, I compete with everything. And to realize that in order to survive, in some things, I'm just going to allow myself to be mediocre. And sometimes that means in my work to say, that's good enough. And so part of the internal shift, the psychological shift we have to do is saying, I cannot be a superhuman at everything, and I cannot be perfect. And in fact, even getting to the point of saying, I don't want to. I don't want to be perfect anymore. I don't want to be above average, because that comes with a lot of stress and pressure. And if you just think about it from a society perspective, if everybody's trying to be above average, average moves. So actually we're all just average at the moment, because we're all trying to be extraordinary, but now extraordinary is just ordinary. And so it's maybe working out, okay, this and this I'm going to push on, and I really want to be excellent in this. But these things I'm just going to let go. Like you'll never perfect your inbox. You will never, ever get to inbox 0, or you might for a minute. And then, you know, it's like the guy sweeping up the autumn leaves in the driveway. You know, you think you're done and you turn around and immediately so striving for inbox 0 is a waste of time and energy. So it's really getting comfortable with the discomfort of unfinished work, missing deadlines. And I know companies don't want to hear this, but that is what will lead to what I call healthy excellence. So that's what we want to work towards, is to say, we all want to be excellent, we want to do a good job, we want to achieve great things, but it is only excellent if my health is still intact, mine and my team's, if I'm a leader. If that excellence has come at the expense of my health, my team's health, and physical, mental, emotional, whatever we want to define health, if that's at the expense, then that cannot be excellent. And I think that is what we have to define for ourselves first, and then organizationally, what is true success and what is sustainable success? Because I think, to your point, at the moment, we're very acute. Success is this short-term win. Success is, you know, just shooting the lights out on this project. And we're not seeing it for the long run. And then it's shifting also our perception of, or our understanding of, what resilience is. So much of the resilience language is grit, determination, leaning in, you know, digging deep, all of that kind of rhetoric, which is not what resilience is. That is a sure path to burnout. And yes, sometimes we have to push ourselves, but not like we're pushing ourselves. Resilience actually is knowing when to stop and rest. And we can only do that if we're comfortable with the discomfort of leaving things unfinished. And so that's the mediocrity one. And then being disagreeable. Nobody wants to be not liked. In fact, when we do our psychometric assessments on hiring, one of the 5 personality traits that we hire for is agreeableness. Because we want people in the organization that are agreeable, that are yes people, and that are good team players and are nice to get along. And obviously we want that. But I think we've taken the agreeableness too far, and everybody's too scared to upset somebody. So we don't want to say no, or we don't want to miss a deadline, or we don't want to say to a team member, sorry, but that's not my job, I don't have capacity, because we think that'll make us disagreeable. And we have to be okay to be disagreeable. We have to be okay for people to upset people, even if that means our boss. And I'm not saying doing things that are now going to put your job at jeopardy, but there is a lot, and I can honestly say this not just theoretically, because I've worked with a wide range of people who say, but I could never say no on that. And I push them and say, what can you say no on? Let's look at what's in your schedule. Is everything absolutely necessary? Where can you push back a little bit? Do you have to do all 5 of those projects at the same time? You know, and when you start really drilling down into it, a lot of it we've put our own urgency onto it. So I think from an individual perspective, it's separating our worth from our work. It's being okay with having work unfinished and being kind of average and mediocre and ordinary, because that's actually just, life is pretty mediocre and ordinary and being okay with that. It's being okay with being disagreeable, and then really just realizing it's just a job.
Yeah.
It's actually just a job. I say that maybe 10, 15 times a day to myself and to the people I work with, is even in such meaningful work that I'm doing, that I absolutely love and I know it's having an impact, I have to keep reminding myself it is just a job at the end of the day.
Yeah, and even if it's meaningful to you and you get a lot of satisfaction and joy out of it, doesn't mean that your life needs to put at risk for it.
Exactly.
I think. Yeah.
And I think that's where it's the whole perception is distorted, and work has just taken up way too much of our worth, our time, our angst. It's just because and yes, I know it gives us our financial security, and without that, our mental health is screwed. I get that.
Yeah.
But I think we've placed too much, because I think it goes back to what we spoke about. I think not working is too scary. Not, facing all the other stuff around the human condition.
Yeah.
So, and even if you are a paramedic or a doctor, and I know your work is then life-saving, it is just a job, and we have to find ways when we're not at that job to switch off, to recharge, to recover, and that's what true resilience is. Again, using the sporting metaphor, marathon runners don't sprint the whole way, because they know that they won't sustain it. But we're just doing one sprint after the next, after the next, after the next, and that's not... We have to learn when to step back, when to rest, how to reset.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot we can do. I'm really not one for like the tips and tricks, because I think they people take them as a silver bullet, and they're very just on the surface then. But if you are intentional about resetting your nervous system, and you do that regularly, it won't help you recover from burnout, but it should help prevent burnout if you're not there yet. And so what I mean by that is, when we are in this hustle system and rushing around and so busy and so anxious about work all the time, our parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, and that's the fight or flight. So what that hustling and busy and rushing is, it's sending signals to our brain that we're in danger. And then we are completely running on adrenaline and cortisol, and the system is activated, and we're not designed to be activated for so long. And that's what's leading to burnout. Yeah. So if you just think about it from a brain perspective, what we want to do is constantly think of, how can I activate my parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest system. It's the calming system. And it's not, you don't have to go and sit and meditate under a tree for an hour. You don't have to do a whole yoga session. All of that, do breathing, deep breathing, all of those things are amazing, but we don't have time for them.
Yeah.
So if you can do those things, that's great. But it's literally just making sure you walk slower where you can. Don't rush from thing to thing. Drive a bit slower. Eat a bit slower. It's making sure when you're standing in the queue somewhere or at a robot, you're not picking up your phone and trying to catch up on emails and WhatsApps. It's just being at the robot. Then you can take a few deep breaths.
By the way, for the people.
Oh, sorry. Yes, not a beep up, beep up. Yeah, sorry, a traffic light. When you are eating your breakfast, just eat your breakfast. Don't also try and catch up on your emails. So I think there's a lot of ways we can just take these slow moments of pause. When you walk to the toilet, don't walk on your phone. When you're on the toilet, don't be on your phone. So it's really just being intentional about saying, how can I eliminate some of the sympathetic activating stuff? Not all of it is in our control, but a lot of it is, and we're making it worse. Don't sleep with your phone next to your bed. Yeah. That is my biggest bugbear, because you're on it all the time. Then before you go to bed, you activate the sympathetic nervous system. You can't sleep at night. You wake up, you're checking. Before you've even put your feet on the floor and your brain and body has had a chance to absorb the rest from the night, you've already checked your emails, your WhatsApps, your social media, the news, and already you're activated. So I know a lot of people say to me, it's my alarm system. That's how I wake up. There's still analog old-fashioned alarm clocks that you can get.
Goes a long way.
You can use those. So I'm just saying, like, I guess the point is there's a lot you can do that we think we can't. And again, we're too busy to buy an analog clock, or we're too busy to change that habit. But it's just about being intentional. And so that's why I'm saying you have to go beneath the surface to say, I want to do these things because I know it's so important. And so my last thought on that, I guess, is just to the burden and the risk. You know, we've always been told about having to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
And for years, I couldn't understand about that on the airplane. I'd be like, are you mad? Because I was so wired to be the people pleaser, the rescuer, the savior. And I remember every time I heard that, I would think to myself, are you mad?
Well, especially because they give the example of children.
Well,
right?
exactly.
Before helping children.
Yes.
Like,
help yourself. And I'm like, are you mad? Never mind if it's my own child or even my own family, a stranger, an adult stranger. There's no way I'd be so selfish to put it on myself first. And one day it really dropped as to why they do that. Because if I don't put the oxygen mask on myself first, I risk fainting.
Yeah.
And then
you can't help anyone.
I can't help anyone. Then I'm a burden to the flight attendant instead of actually being of assistance. And that's what happens if we keep pushing, if we keep trying to be there for everyone, if we keep saying yes, if we keep, trying to prove that we're an amazing employee or friend or daughter or whatever it is, or leader, HR professional. If we keep trying to prove these things, we're actually end up being a burden.
Yeah.
And so it's really shifting this narrative that we've been told.
And what's really interesting, I think, about the examples that you've given now, what people can do in the day-to-day and, all the like small things, like you said, with the phone and taking breaks and not kind of consuming, actually. That's kind of what we're doing, consuming and responding all the time, reacting. I think what that also enables is because you spoke a lot about the nervous system and regulating that system, which I think plays such a big role in our communication in a company, right? In a community, like a company. I think I see it as a form of a community, or like or at least I think that's what it should be ideally. And in a structure like that, I think what also regulates your system is a form of communicating your boundaries, or you briefly touched on that before. If you like if someone is asking you to hand in a report or some sort of deadline, and you realize I can't do it, I can't meet that deadline, to communicate that, and not communicate it out of spite or because you're bored or because you can't be asked, but because you checked in with yourself on the way to the bathroom, or whilst you were in the car, or where you had a moment where you weren't on your phone, and you kind of, I think that can be the effect of taking those small steps, and then being able to have these moments where you can check in and realize, actually, I'm wrecked, I can't do that today, and then communicating that boundary. And I think that form of communication and speaking your truth and speaking for yourself is regulating your system as well. Like it activates your vagus nerve, it regulates it communicates to both people on either end of the conversation that you're creating a safety for yourself, and therefore you're handing back responsibility also to someone else, or you're sharing responsibility, or whatever it is in the moment. But I think what I'm trying to say is those small steps and the things you mentioned can go a long way, and they can enable, I think you said multiple times, that's not the only thing that will change the system, right? Like all these, like changing your diet and the vitamins and like all of that stuff. But what I'm hearing is that these small things can have, they can open a door into a space where you create capacity for yourself to check in with yourself on what you're actually feeling, and then you can communicate that, and that's actually then making an actual shift and a change. But yeah, so I'm curious, you spoke a lot on the individual now, and I think that's all really valuable information. And now I'm curious, because you also touched on that briefly, that individuals can do a lot in a company to make change, but the company needs to follow as well. They need to follow suit, and either open a space for the individuals to make that change or grow, or follow the change that the individuals create, or ideally create that all together, I guess. But so I'm curious what your thoughts are on what maybe leaders in HR can do, maybe specifically leaders actually, for their employees to have a space where they can share these boundaries and they feel safe to share them, or they are heard in their fears as well and in their insecurities, or what are your thoughts on that?
So I think just on what you said about the nervous system, is our nervous system energy is contagious. And actually we pick up on somebody's nervous system energy before we pick up on anything else. And so as a leader, the core thing, the first thing that is the most important is for you to regulate your own nervous system. Because if you're sympathetically activated, that is unconsciously physically going to activate the people around you. And so we can do all these other things, and we can talk about, I mean, a big concept at the moment is psychological safety, and I'll speak into that a little bit, but we can talk about all these amazing theories and thoughts and practices, but if your own system is not regulated, none of that's really going to hold, because it won't be credible, because in your presence they're going to feel activated, they're going to feel unsafe, because you are emitting danger signals, because you're wired. So all the stuff that I spoke about on an individual level, I think that's the first thing a leader needs to do, is make sure that they are taking care of their own health, their mental well-being and physical well-being, and continuously activating the parasympathetic nervous system so that they're calming themselves down. Because only then will people start to feel safe in your presence. And that's essentially what organizations need to start doing is, I mean, obviously systemically we need to look at workload, because I think it's unrealistic at the moment. Resourcing, everything, people trying to do more with less at the moment, cost cutting. And I get that they're financial strains, but I think some companies are just taking it too far. And they're cutting teams down to the bare minimum. And there's 3 or 4 people now doing the work of what should have been 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And back to my point, those individuals just keep delivering because they're scared that they'll be next. And so the leaders are like, well, we're managing on the smaller team. So yes, it's for those individuals to push back, but the system has to listen to that. And if people are saying we cannot deliver, they've got to step back, because leaders, in their defense, they've lost touch with the nitty-gritty of what the job entails. So if you're saying, yes, it can be done, they're going to take your word for it.
Yeah.
So as a leader, it's if somebody comes to you and says, this is not possible, or I don't have capacity, it's to listen into that. And we're so scared of people are taking advantage, they'll take advantage of the system. Like, why do we immediately default to the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Yes, there is always maybe 1 in 10 that will take the piss out of a system like that and will take advantage, but then you performance manage them. But why must we punish everybody who's actually doing a good job? And so your first thing is, if somebody's saying, I don't have capacity, or we won't meet that deadline, or that's unrealistic, listen. I'm not saying you have to immediately agree, but just listen to what they're saying. Try and understand, how are they thinking about this thing? How maybe they're not being as efficient as they could be. So give them that support to say, I hear you, let's think it through. Or let's try and, how can I help you prioritize? So the resourcing and workload really needs to be looked at, because that's when people feel, all anybody wants is to feel seen, heard and loved. And when you can help, and I know people don't like to use the word love in the organizational space, but seen, heard and valued. So when somebody feels seen, then you're working together in a partnership here, because ultimately it's really fundamentally believing your people want to deliver. They want to do a good job. They don't wake up in the morning thinking, well, how can I stuff up today? Or how can I do the least amount of work? And I know a lot of leaders challenge me on that, because they're like, but you haven't made my team. And I really fundamentally believe majority of people want to do a good job, and if they're not, there's something getting in their way. And so as a leader,
there's a reason if that is the case.
Exactly. So listen into it, because what psychological safety at its physiological level means is we want people to be able to bring their full brain to work. So if you're activated sympathetically and you're giving out danger signals, if people are completely exhausted and burnt out and overwhelmed all the time, their prefrontal cortex does not work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our thinking part of our brain. That's the executive part of our brain that helps us do our work,
Mm-hmm.
helps us think, helps us reason, emotional regulation, all those things. And so creating psychological safety says to people, you can bring your whole brain here.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, people are coming to work act in their fight or flight, and you're not getting the best out of them.
And then you just have leaders and workers activated and
actually wheel spinning often the time, and we're just busy. It's just become the default because everybody's just activated. Nobody is pausing, breathing to say, what are we so busy about? Let's reevaluate. What's kind of most important? And then to your point, reflecting in, what do we have capacity for?
Yeah.
And that needs to go all the way to the top. And I mean, I work with a lot of senior execs, and when they start realizing the pressure that they're putting underneath on the people below them, it starts to shift the system. But for many of them, they've spent their whole life striving, this drivenness, this ambition. It's what got them to that position. And now to hear, well, you have to actually take your foot off the accelerator a bit and slow down. It's like, it's hard for them because they've got all this responsibility. But also what they realize, often in the work with me is they realize they've got this responsibility to deliver for the business and the shareholders or the board or whatever it is. But they also have a responsibility to their people and to make sure that their people are healthy, because that's just it's plain business risk if we want to talk business language.
Yeah. So do you think there is because you just mentioned it can be quite an intense shift going from having one sort of mindset that has maybe built this whole company and you get a lot of rewards and it's paying off essentially. But maybe then at some point realizing, it used to pay off, but now I don't feel so good and something needs to change. But then then you come in at this point maybe and you introduce a new sort of mindset and approach. What do you think is, maybe does it need smaller steps in between so that the shift isn't as extreme and it can be built gradually? Or do you think sometimes it needs a hard, maybe in your case, a hard out, and do people need to be shaken sometimes? Or is it, I'm guessing it's also an individual, depending on every individual, but how's that experience been in your work, just with your clients?
I mean, I think it does, it can, for some people it's lots of layers, unpeeling and peeling and kind of realizing and kind of making small shifts. Most often, though, I think at that level, what I see is it does require, or not require, what happens is it's a crash. Something happens. They collapse, they have a health issue, they get divorced, something happens that they then are forced to pause and reevaluate and shift. And I wish that it wouldn't have to be that.
That it wouldn't have to go so far in the first place,
because the repercussions are so huge and damaging, and often it's trauma that people experience. But I think sometimes maybe that's just the way we are as humans. It's like we need that big wake-up call before we're willing to actually do. They know something needs to change. They don't know what, or they're often quite terrified to do that change, and then your body will do it for you. I always say, if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness, and that's what I see time and time again. There's been some cases where it's just happened without that, and that's obviously much nicer for the person and their family and the system. But they also then have to be in a system that is receptive to their shifts. And so sometimes if the individual is struggling and the system is putting pressure, the only thing that's going to help shift is some kind of crisis.
Okay, yeah. And so, I was going to ask, what do you think with people that you have worked with that weren't pushed as far and were more willing to get help earlier or consult either friends or people like yourself, what do you think what's the difference? Is it a generational thing that people are more willing to get help at an earlier point, or is it is it a sense of like your community or your surroundings, or what has been your experience like? The reason I'm asking is because I'm wondering, how can we get people to the point where they can create, where they essentially don't need you. You know what I mean?
You want to get rid of me. Do me out of a job. No.
Yeah, exactly. I think that should be every therapist's goal, you know?
Absolutely.
Like what can I do to make, as like I'm speaking it from a therapist's perspective, like what can I do so that you can help yourself, so that you
Absolutely.
I think that would be that's the biggest goal.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, you said something about the generations. I'm just thinking, I mean, I'll start there because I think there is definitely a generational difference that, and I know the millennials get such a bad rap, and for me, actually, like, it's an amazing generation because there is this awareness of I'm not going to kill myself for my job, but that doesn't make people lazy, entitled, what did I hear today? Soft. They've never had a hardship in their life.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is you grew up and you're adulting in a world that is very harsh and collapsing on every level. So you do know hardship, but you're not prepared to sacrifice your whole being for work. And I think that is the main shift from what they say Gen X to the millennials. And the Gen Xers and above just don't understand it because we sold our souls to work. And we sacrificed everything for it. And we were rewarded and we were applauded. And that's the narrative. And I think the younger generations are coming in and shifting it.
Which is, I think, very interesting that you just mentioned you were rewarded and applauded, but the generation that is come out of that generation, you're responsible for that generation, right? They are your children.
Exactly.
Like figuratively speaking, but also literally speaking. And I think that's always very interesting when I have conversations with people that are older than me or from like the generation before me or Generation X, is like, I always think, yeah, but like maybe that worked within the system. You had your rewards and you had success, but look at the generation that came out of that. Exactly. You're responsible just as much as I'm responsible for the generation after me, and we can't detach each other, like ourselves from each other. You know, that's not. And the fact that we are taking the steps, or my generation is taking the steps that they are to be more healthy, to be more like mentally maybe aware or physically more healthy, whatever it is a direct result of us observing another generation. You know, it's not because we pick it out of thin air and we realize, we want to do something different. It's because of our lived experience, because of our parents that we witness and our grandparents. And so like I think I very much agree.
Absolutely. And I think it's right. So for me, I'm kind of excited for when kind of the 20 to early 30-year-olds start getting into the senior leadership positions, because I think that's truly when we'll start seeing a shift. At the moment, I think the senior leadership is still too much of my generation, and it's too much, got to work at all costs, work is most important, work ethic is everything, and that all, we're still so inculcated from the Calvinistic era where hard work was like the moral fortitude. You were a good, virtuous person when you worked hard, and that's, it's shifting, and it's saying, well, the impact of that way of being is that we have actually ruined everything because all we've done is worked, and the consequences have been devastating. So I think the next generation is much more prepared and willing and open to preventative. So let's not get there. I don't want to sit around the dinner table like my father and mother did and complain about work and be exhausted and have no time for my children. I don't want to do that. So how do I prevent it? And so when I coach new leaders or younger leaders, I think, well, it's still early to tell, but I don't think that they're heading for a crash. They're slow. I'm having to undo a lot of deep ambition and drive and that connection to worth, and that same psychology is there, but they're much younger, so it hasn't calcified into a way of being with work. So there's definitely a much bigger openness and much less of an attachment to a job, to a company, to a career, because as you said earlier, it's so much more aware of this fluidity of this world and how quickly, I mean, things change all the time. So they're not bedded, and they don't feel this deep sense of loyalty. And I think that scares a lot of older generations, especially if you're a leader in an organization. But the shift has to be to say, okay, we're going to get this person maximum 3 to 4 years in our team. How do we extract the best out of them? Not in a kind of abusive way, but that means we've got to take care of them. We've got to understand how they tick. We've got to, help them be the best resource, so that for that period we get the best of them.
Yeah.
And then we prepare them for their next, and then we'll get another one.
Exactly. It's like how do we offer an environment that makes it worth their while?
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Absolutely.
It goes both ways for sure. But I think a lot of companies don't. A lot of companies don't worry about or like think about like what kind of environment they create. For whatever reason, maybe because they know they always get someone else or someone new. But I think that's a really good point, because even if there's big influx at a company and people come and go at a frequent rate, ideally you want to create a structure for the workers and an environment for kind of like the bottom up communication that is worth their while and interesting for them to stay as long as they like, And I think if it is an environment and a system that is healthy, it's like a big word, but that kind of contains everything we've been speaking about. But if it is healthy in that way, it is just much more likely for people to stay longer and hanging around for 9 hours a day and kind of spending 2 or 3 hours actually doing something, or just doing the work that they're supposed to, and then maybe going above and beyond because they believe in it.
Exactly.
And then we're back at the Gen X kind of argument of like, but we're giving everything, we're going above and beyond, and then it's like it's stepping out of the conversation of I'm going past my capacity, but I'm going more in because I believe it and I like doing it. Like very much, I can very much speak for myself that like when I've worked on projects and on jobs that I like, I can work for 14 hours and I feel strong and healthy after. And I had an amazing day and I barely ate and drank and had no breaks, but I just believed in this, and it's like a fuel. And you can't do that every day for the rest of your life, but there can be moments like that where you really, like maybe there's a deadline or a project that you just love, because the company has created an environment for you where you can do that and you still feel supported, and you choose. I think the difference is what I'm getting at is if it comes from within yourself because you burn for something or you believe in a certain aspect of your work, then you have more capacity to go harder and longer. Yeah. But you can only do that if you know that you can also then you can fall back on a system that has your back after that moment.
Absolutely.
And you can maybe take a day off, or people then see that you're recognized for the sprint, that you mentioned that you did, and then you can take a rest before you start walking again or running again.
Absolutely. And I think that's it is about saying when people are committed and engaged, when they feel safe, when they know that the workload is reasonable, they will push. And especially, this thing of like the younger generation's lazy. I haven't come across one lazy 20-year-old. Like the ability, as you say, to work 14, 15-hour days, like not stop until they're done, is there. But it has to be for a cause they believe in. It has to be because they feel supported and because they know they can rest afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're missing at the moment. We want that. We call that the discretionary effort. We want that from people, but we're not giving them the pause and the rest and the recovery. It's like you do that and then there's your next and there's your next. And so some of the companies I work with that are, really, really back themselves and aren't just well-being washing, that they really are looking at the culture of well-being. They talk about, or they allow mental health days. Which I love. I mean, since my child started going to school, he's allowed one mental health day a term, which doesn't have to be sick, doesn't have to lie to me that he's sick. It's just like, I just can't today. I just cannot face the world. I'm just putting my duvet over my head. And I don't question him. And I'll often say if he does it in the first week or two of term, like, are you sure? Because this is your day,
it's your only
this
one.
is your only one. But again, I think if you give your staff once a quarter. I mean, I'd love it once a month, a mental health day where they don't have to get a doctor's certificate. They don't have to be sick, because people are phoning in and saying they're sick when they're not really.
Yeah.
It's just that they can't face the day. They're just overwhelmed. We will go such a long way to prevent more of the burnout and the overwhelm, and even people falling into depression and anxiety, because if I'm feeling overwhelmed and I can catch it because I'm pausing and checking in with myself. And one day isn't enough, but it's the culture of the company that says, okay, take that day, take it. We'll talk about, because you're sending the message of we can talk about it. So, okay, so you come back from your mental health day. As a leader, I need to say, okay, so what happened? I don't need to know the details, but is it a work thing? Can we support you?
Yeah.
Or if it's personal, fine, but how do we support you? You create this culture where you can bring that stuff and talk about it. And so, again, leaders say to me, oh, but we can't do mental health days. People take advantage of it. Why must you punish everybody because one or two people, if somebody's taking advantage of it, then you directly deal with it.
Yeah.
Most people won't. And most people, when I ran that school, I also had the thing with the teachers, you can take a mental health day. I think we did it once a month. And most of them didn't take it because they had too much work to do, or they didn't want to look like they were weak. So there's most workers will struggle to even take it. But we want to, and I'm not saying that that's a good thing. We want them to take it.
Yeah.
And so it's how do you create that culture to say it's okay to take time off even if you're not physically sick. To put your hand up and say, I'm not coping. And as I said, it goes back to leaders being able to be well and for them to be able to also take the time off. I get that so often of, my company speaks and they really try hard. They speak about well-being and they say we don't have to work after hours and we mustn't work weekends and we can take time off, to go to our doctor's appointments or watch our son's cricket match or whatever. But our leaders never do. And if as a leader you're not doing it, your team is seeing that it's actually not okay. Because if I want to be a leader, or maybe if I want to actually be respected by you, then I must keep working.
Yeah, I need to follow you.
Yeah, follow you.
Example, yeah.
And so as a leader, you've got to lead by doing these things yourself. The most important thing as a leader is to just acknowledge that and say it's hard and it's you've got to be up for the task. And I know often people get promoted into leadership because they're good at their job, or not necessarily because they want to be a leader. Majority of leaders I know just landed up there. And then they're thinking, well, A, how did I land up here? And B, like, how do I do this thing? And so it's understanding that it's complex and that you yourself as a leader needs the support. So even in companies that are very open to taking care of their employees' mental health, there's often a thing of, yes, they need it. Let's do something for the staff. Let's do something for my team. And there's this expectation that as a leader, I'm fine, or I should be fine. I should have it all together. And I think part of it for leaders is to just acknowledge you're also human. You're also an employee of the company. And you're also under even more pressure and stress. So when there's opportunities for well-being stuff, you need to take it for yourself too. And sometimes if there's limited budget, I've pushed some leaders to say, rather use this on yourself. Let's rather give you some coaching, because what we said earlier, the ripple effect is huge, and it's not about being selfish. It's, again, that putting the oxygen mask on yourself. And it's the same with HR. So I think HR professionals have a equally complex and hard job. And I think you mentioned it earlier, the complexities of being there for the employees, but also having to be there for the business. And I often call them the marshmallow layer. They're like cushioning from above and below and all sides. And for HR, it's also about saying you're also an employee. I always say, who's HR for HR? Like, where do you go? And so you've got to be HR for yourself. And again, if there's limited budget, like, you can spend some of it on yourself, either for your own coaching, or what I offer is reflective groups practices or supervision for groups of HR professionals, where you can come together and just share some of the heaviness of your load, explore some of the complexities of the work that you're dealing with, because so much of what you do is confidential. And so it's realizing that to be a good leader or a good HR professional, you cannot do it alone or in isolation. You have to do it within a community. You need support, and that doesn't mean you're weak. That actually means that you're aware of your capacity and that you're doing something to support yourself.
Yeah.
And then just lastly on that, I suppose what many leaders and HR professionals are experiencing, and it's not spoken of because we just don't know about it in the organizational space, is a kind of burnout called compassion fatigue. And obviously as healthcare professionals, we know a lot about that. And as when I was studying for my clinical masters, we were taught a lot about how to recognize it in ourselves and what to do to prevent it. But as leaders and HR professionals, you're in caring professions too, but nobody's told you, how do you care in a healthy way? And so compassion fatigue is a particular form of burnout where you actually just lose the ability to care.
You've stopped making space for yourself, essentially.
But how that converts in behavior is you literally just have no capacity to care for the people around you. And I know when I've bordered on that, my sign is sometimes in my head, I'll think, can you just take a teaspoon of cement and harden up? Like we've all got it tough. Why? It's just stop crying, kind of thing. And I know some leaders and HR professionals have obviously very under clouds of shame admitted that to me, and it shouldn't be, because you're a human. You're going to run out of capacity to care if you don't care for yourself. And so again, you can't do it in isolation. And I think it's saying to leaders and HR professionals, you are part of the organization, you're also an employee, you also need to be on the receiving end of all well-being and wellness initiatives. And if there's not a huge amount of budget, rather spend it on yourself. And I know that feels so counterculture, but your employees will benefit far more than if you run a workshop for them or offer them extra perks. The biggest impact will be on yourself, because I always say you have to be well to lead well.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to end it, I think.
Exclamation mark, full stop.
Yes.